Hello and welcome to The Big Picture. I'm Teena Jha. With the start of the new year, India officially began its 2-year term as a non-permanent member of the United Nations Security Council. The country's flag will be installed at the UNSC stakeout on Monday, which is the first working day of 2021. India's permanent representative to the United Nations, Ambassador T.S. Tirumurthy, will be installing the tricolour. In fact, he's also expected to make brief remarks at the special ceremony. India will sit in the 15-nation United Nations Security Council for the 2021-22 term as a non-permanent member, and this is the 8th time that the country has had a seat on the powerful horseshoe table. Also, later in August this year, India will be the UNSC president and will also preside over the council once again for 1 month in the year 2022. So on this edition of The Big Picture, we will be talking about India's 2-year term at the UNSC and its priorities during its membership. Joining me for a discussion today are former Ambassador Prabhu Dayal, Mr. Arvind Gupta, Director, Vivekananda International Foundation, and Mr. Shakti Sinha, Director, Atal Bihari Vajpayee Institute of International Studies, Vadodara. Welcome to Rajya Sabha TV, gentlemen. Ambassador, let me begin the program with you. You know, India was elected to the UNSC this time around with an overwhelming majority, 184 of the 192 votes. So what, according to you, are going to be its priorities in this 2-year term going forward?
Well, Teena, thank you for having me on your show. Let me mention that our External Affairs Minister, Mr. Jaishankar, has said that India's main priority during its membership will be counter-terrorism. He said that India will strive to achieve a concrete and result-oriented action at the Security Council for an effective response to international terrorism. Now, India is also expected to call for more transparency in listing and delisting of entities and individuals by the UN Sanctions Committee. You know, we have a lot of unhappiness about this process. Of course, getting permanent membership in an expanded council is also high up on the agenda. Now, I would like to recall that on 26 September, Prime Minister Modi had delivered a brilliant virtual address during the general debate of the 75th session of the UN General Assembly, in which he had made an impassioned and forceful plea for India's candidature for permanent membership of the UN Security Council. The composition of the Security Council was established in 1945, and the victors of the Second World War had shaped the UN Charter in their national interests, giving to themselves the veto power in the Security Council. And our Prime Minister has stressed this when he said that the world of 1945 was significantly different from today's world. The global situation, sources, resources, problems, solutions, all were quite different. So keeping this in mind, he had urged that reform in the processes and in the very character of the UN is the need of the hour. So I think that we will be emphasizing the need for UN reform and for a permanent membership for India in the UN Security Council, because I think that is the need of the hour, and that is, I think, what a country like India deserves.
Okay, Mr. Arvind Gupta, you know, we'll talk about the UNSC reforms and India's bid, of course, for a permanent seat at the UNSC a little later. But first, your remarks on going forward in the 8th term. We've served 7 terms as a non-permanent member at the UNSC. What, according to you, is going to be different this time around as we begin our 8th 2-year term at the Security Council?
Thank you for having me on the show. And I'll pick up this point which Ambassador Prabhu Dayal made, that the environment, the global environment has changed so dramatically, even in the last 10 years when we were the members in 2011-12, that we require entirely new approaches to deal with the world in the post-COVID world.
Yes.
Today, multilateralism is under stress. And we require greater and not less collaboration and cooperation. And if you look at the record of the UN Security Council, in fact, it is the source of many of the problems of the world today. How? One, its procedures are so outdated that the non-permanent members, how much say do they have in setting the agenda is itself a question mark. Number two, the UN Security Council has P5. It has a two-tier structure, as you know. The P5 within themselves are so conflicted and they contradict each other, and that creates huge problems in the international security situation. Ambassador Prabhu mentioned about terrorism, which we know that in the last 10 or 11 years has become worse, in fact. And today, with the use of ICT technologies and innovative use of this bitcoins and cryptocurrencies, etc., by terrorists, the situation is going out of control. And there are so many other issues that have come up. And in the COVID, the issues of food and health security, the issues of the link between peace, development, and security, these things have totally been forgotten. So I think India could take some initiatives by itself and with like-minded countries and see how to make its mark in the next 2 years. It would be too much to expect that India alone can do anything because P5, the concurrence of P5 is very important in most of these issues. But I think within the UN Security Council, there are other channels also, like the group meetings with the experts, engaging with the other organizations, etc. So I think India should look at what are the possibilities and opportunities that are there to flag these issues. That itself is very important.
Certainly. Mr. Shakti Sinha, coming to you, India is assuming the role as a non-permanent member, coming against the backdrop of a world that's been battered by the COVID-19 pandemic. There are fissures among the permanent members, of course, of the UNSC and also other countries in the world as well. As the world's largest democracy, what values do you see India taking forward and standing for at the UN Security Council?
Thank you, Teena, and thank you for that question. Ambassador Prabhu rightly said that both the Foreign Minister, the Prime Minister, and even Tirumurti in his statement today was very clear that we need single-minded determination of terrorism. Having said that, Tirumurti made very interesting points about the fact that we will highlight democracy, human rights, and development. And I think in the post-COVID world we just mentioned, it's time that we understood, one, how the world has changed, how the systems that we thought are stable are no more stable, how the biggest country in terms of power, economy in the world may not be coming on the table in a very cohesive and single-focused manner. In that situation, the need not to allow some people to hijack the agenda is very important. So therefore, the stress on democracy, as sovereigns, we are all equal, whether you're a country of 50,000, St. Kitts and Nevis, or a country of 1.3 billion, we have to be equal. To bring this to the point, that human rights are very important, I think I'm very comforted by the fact that India coming in for the 8th time is for the first time, in my opinion, talking so openly about democracy and human rights. Development has always been important for us, and post-COVID, obviously, development is going to be even more important. But to stress democracy and human rights, I think is a significant inflection point, and I hope that India will really bring to bear. India does carry, as you know, it was not our chance to be on Security Council, Afghanistan's chance. Afghanistan agreed to step back to allow India. The need for India now to assume not leadership in the old crude way, but leadership as a consensus person, somebody who builds relationships, is very, very important. And I think, I'm sure that we will take this task very seriously.
Ambassador Prabhu Dayal, with values like democracy, human rights, human development, going forward, what role do you see India playing towards having a more cooperative structure? Because it comes against the backdrop of frictions between countries and where finding solutions is going to be the ultimate objective.
Well, the world has diverse needs. Humanity has many, many aspirations. But when Prime Minister spoke at the UN ECOSOC's high-level dialogue in July this year, he had said that only reformed multilateralism with a reformed United Nations at its center, can meet the aspirations of humanity.
Yes.
Now, the problem is that there are serious impediments which stand in the way of democracy and human rights. And one of the biggest impediments is China. Now, it is an irony that India, being the largest democracy of the world, with more than 18% of the world population, is not a permanent member of the Security Council, and the world's largest and most ruthless dictatorship, China, sits at the high table at the UN Security Council as a permanent member and is able to force its own agenda on other nations, includes the fact that the world must look away while human rights are trampled within China. The world must look away while friends of China like Pakistan can get away with terrorism and other activities which violate human rights. So the fact of the matter is that the United Nations Security Council was fashioned in 1945. And as the Prime Minister said, India has made significant contributions to the world. India had sent its soldiers for about 50 peacekeeping missions. It is also the country that has lost the maximum number of soldiers in the course of establishing peace. And even in these very difficult times of COVID-19, the pharma industry of India has sent essential medicines to more than 150 countries. So all this illustrates how India is playing the role of a global power and how it is cooperating with other countries in a positive fashion and in a way that promotes democracy, in a way that ushers in human rights, while on the other hand, you have a country like China, which stands as an impediment. So once again, we come back to this basic fact that the United Nations objectives can only be achieved once the reform process is carried out. And I think that is going to be at the center of our efforts during our 2-year term as a non-permanent member of the UN Security Council.
Right. Mr. Gupta, obviously, as both our panelists have also pointed out, Security Council reforms is the need of the hour, and that is something that India, of course, is going to take forward in its term. Do you think this 8th term, as also, of course, as a non-permanent member, will bolster India's long-time candidature now for a permanent seat in a revamped United Nations Security Council that we're talking about?
India's eligibility to be the permanent member of the UN Security Council is there for everyone to see. And we have been involved with the efforts, both as individually and as part of G4 for a very, very long time. But let us be real. I don't think UN Security Council reform is anywhere close to what we might like to. So because the P5 are simply not interested, despite some of them paying a lip service. And it is very unlikely that in the next 2 years, UN Security Council reforms would happen or any meaningful push would be given. On the other hand, reformed multilateralism, while it includes the reform of the UN Security Council, also means many other things. And I think this has been identified, number of issues have been identified, and we should really be working on those issues. I think this gives us a chance because today our international image is far better than it ever was. We have handled the COVID-19 situation very well. As Ambassador Prabhu Dayal pointed out, we have supplied medicine. We are emerging as the pharmacy of the world. And today, in the era of technology, we are building digital infrastructure, which is that experience is useful to many. We are also raising our voice for the removal of the poverty, for the completion of the SDG goals. So we represent the aspirations of many, many countries all over the world. And I think this is the time for us to get back into that community where we also are seen as raising the concerns of the Asia-Pacific countries who have voted for us and many other countries, 184 you said. Now we should really be teaming up with those countries, and particularly within the UN Security Council, the newly elected member countries. There is Mexico, there is Vietnam, there is Niger, there is Kenya. So these countries also have their own issues. So I think that is one way to move forward, taking the collective aspirations of the humanity and bringing it there. And let's not forget that in the paper which the MEA had brought out and some slides which they had brought out when the elections were taking place. And here, last point, this is about technology. Technology with a human touch or humane face. This has also been one of the priorities which have been articulated by our leaders. And I think that's a very, very apt direction in which we should be moving.
Okay. Mr. Sinha, your remarks on, what Mr. Gupta said, that it's been a long drawn process for India. We've been calling out for UNSC reforms for several years now, but no tangible progress towards reforms of the UNSC have been made. But now, coming to the fight against the COVID-19 pandemic, and if we talk about India's role in terms of helping the world, has been very, very significant. We've supplied medicines to over 150 countries. Our medical teams have also been deployed to help neighbors in times of distress. Do you think that could be a big role? Could these be factors big enough that could boost India's credentials for a permanent seat at the UNSC?
Teena, as Arvind rightly pointed out, Security Council is all about power. It's not about how good you are. I'm not suggesting for a moment we should not be good. I mean, I loved Tirumurthy when he spoke today to the press in New York, issued this formal statement on the Security Council and the UN democratization reforms. He said, quote, not a single thing has moved. Basically, nobody will invite you to sit on the high table. You have to kick yourself into the room. Literally kick yourself into the room. This is not going to happen easily. See, to prevent India, China is there, but China takes a back seat, puts up Pakistan. To prevent Germany, Italy is there. To prevent Brazil, Mexico is there. And to prevent Japan, of course, China is there again. So, it's not going to be easy. However, let us not be disheartened by it. As somebody said, I will not like to be a member of such a club. We should be there. We have a legitimate right to be there, really legitimate. Prabhu Dayal was absolutely right. The biggest democracy in the world, a functional democracy, a raucous democracy. Everybody is involved in everything, right? We should be there. Even if you're not there, as the pharmaceutical of the world, you have to work with other countries. I don't like the word help so much. I prefer the word cooperation. We have to cooperate with the other countries in working towards it. COVID has shown us there are no boundaries. So just because I'm rich or I'm this thing, I'm not immune to all these things. And therefore, for all of us to combine forces, and therefore the stress on development, but development does not happen in a vacuum. For that, you require democracy. Countries of the world must understand that till the UN system is reformed, you will have distorted decision-making in the UN. You will have countries which hide, literally suppress information about problems in their country, export it out when the millions after the Chinese New Year go back to their countries of work, United States, Europe, England, etc. We have to understand that this is not normal. This is something which is dangerous. But to do that, you really, as I said, work as a team. Become a leader, a cooperative leader, not a leader who top-down kind of a leader. So I think this is a good opportunity for us. But let's not overhype it. Let's not pretend that this will solve all the world problems. Nobody, as I began by saying, is going to invite you into the room. You have to literally force yourself onto the high table.
Certainly. Ambassador Prabhu Dayal, when it comes to extending support to India's candidature for a permanent seat, or for that matter, for Germany, Japan, Brazil, there is a lot of support from countries. In fact, some permanent members have also extended support to India. But do you agree with Mr. Gupta that they don't really want to change status quo and expand membership? Is that the biggest stumbling block for India's permanent bid at the UNSC?
Well, you're right that there have been expressions of support for India's candidature from 4 out of the 5 permanent members, that is US, UK, Russia and France.
Yes.
But as Mr. Arvind Gupta said, our feeling is that these countries merely pay lip service to us, because they really know that given the nature of India's relations with China, that country is going to veto any question of India being made a permanent member of the UN Security Council. Now, to be a member of the UN Security Council as a permanent member, or for any UN Security Council reform to take place, all the five permanent members must agree. In addition, there has to be the support of 2/3 of the members of the General Assembly. Now, assuming that we can get the support of 2/3 of the General Assembly, I don't think we will get the support of the P5. However, knowing that, we still have to raise our voice against a situation which is extremely unjust. And I would remind everybody that when he addressed the UN General Assembly in September this year, the Prime Minister made it a point of doing so and saying, for how long will India be kept out of the decision-making structures of the United Nations? At the moment, unfortunately, despite our aspirations, despite our qualifications, the entire thing is tilted against any meaningful role that India can play in the UN process beyond a certain extent, because the decision-making process is masterminded and controlled by the P5. So to raise our voice against it is our right. And I think that during our term as a non-permanent member, we will continue to do so in every possible manner, while also pointing out how a permanent member like China is impeding justice, how it is making the process of listing and delisting of terror entities less than transparent, how it is putting the cloak of secrecy on so many aspects relating to the United Nations. So all that is wrong within the UN system does need to be highlighted. And I think as a non-permanent member of the UN Security Council, we will be doing everything possible. We may not be able to achieve all the desired results, but then that is something that we have to live with. That should not, however, keep us from raising our voice against whatever we see that is wrong within the UN system.
Yes, the efforts will continue. Mr. Arvind Gupta, all this while we had been calling out for UNSC reforms. We had been garnering support from countries, from friendly countries. Now with India actually having a seat on the powerful horseshoe table, do you see the group within the United Nations which will actually looking into the UNSC reforms, the intergovernmental negotiations framework, making some progress? It hasn't done so far since 2009. Now with India actually on board, some progress can be expected?
Well, it's difficult to be definite about these things, and it will all depend upon how India plays its cards and what opportunities it has. But there's nothing to suggest at this moment that there is any ray of hope in taking the text-based negotiation process very far, because it's really ultimately the politics. The coffee club is still alive, and some countries in the P5, they do not want it. So they'll raise all kinds of objections to this process moving forward. So I think we should not over-expect from on this front. But as I said, there are many other things that we can do. You look at, for instance, just the agenda of the UN Security Council. One would like to know, how is the agenda really decided? There again, the P5, they have a very big role in deciding on the agenda. If you look, for instance, at the agenda as decided before India has come in, say, for the month of January, all the issues are traditional issues. They will discuss Yemen, they will discuss Syria, they will discuss UN peacekeeping, they will discuss many other issues. So India will have to muscle into these issues and raise these issues. Whether it is UN peacekeeping, for instance, and their mandate setting is one of the identified points for India to work on. I mean, this has been done by the MEA, etc. So I think agenda setting itself. So we have to really look at the nitty-gritty of how the UN Security Council works, and that is where we should be really looking for the opportunities. But having said that, since we are in the UN Security Council, there is a lot of focus on India. So can we use that our presence itself to start dealing with the other aspects of the UN Security Council reform, which are also equally important. So I think that is the way we have to move forward.
All right. So with that remark, we'll have to wrap up this edition of The Big Picture. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on the program for such an insightful discussion on India's UNSC tenure. So that's it from us on The Big Picture for now. See you again tomorrow. Thank you very much for your time.